Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Up North Community Podcast. I'm your host, David, and today we're going to be talking about the movie Consecration. So, Consecration came out in 2023, but it's due its digital release on the 16th of June. We're going to be talking a little bit about the movie and the storylines, my thoughts on the movie, and also, if there's going to be any spoilers, I'll make sure to shout those out. But let's get into it. So we'll start with a little bit about the movie, the cast and the director. So it's directed by Christopher Smith. If anyone's seen Triangle with Melissa George, which is an excellent horror movie, he directed that. It stars Jena Malone, um, who you will probably recognize from Hunger Games, but she's been in quite a lot of stuff. And also Danny Houston, who I always remember as the head vampire from 30 Days of Night. Um, but he has got a massive filmography, so again, have a look through that, and there's bound to be a lot of stuff in there that you've seen that before. So what's Consecration all about? So Jenna Malone, as mentioned, plays Grace, who's an eye doctor in the US. She has to travel to a remote convent in Scotland in the Highlands when she finds out her brother's died in mysterious circumstances. He was a priest there. The story she's given is that he committed suicide, but obviously when she gets there, there's a lot more to it than that. What follows is like a spiraling journey into trauma, her faith, the question of whether what Grace is experiencing is psychological or supernatural. The tone is pretty bleak, and it doesn't give clear answers. The setting's stark and grey, and it's oppressive, and that sense of dread never really lifts throughout the whole movie. My first impressions were like the cinematography was really, really stunning. The Scottish Highlands look amazing. Um, and this movie is like unafraid to sit in silence, so there will be moments where there's silence there, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. Um, it's not for casual horror fans. This like if you're into slashers or jump scares, then this probably isn't your cup of tea. But if you like the slow burns, cerebral horrors, then this might be your thing. And I'm a big fan of like religious horrors. So like The Exorcist, The Omen, Deliver Us from Evil. I loved the first Omen last year. Um, so this on paper is right up my street. We'll dive into a little bit about performances. So Jenna Malone is fantastic in this. She's a great lead for this movie. She carries the film at times. The character she plays is defensive and broken and haunted, and she gives Grace this constant edge. Like she's either 1 second away from like running off or just like snapping and really going off on one. Um, then we've got Danny Houston. Danny Houston is one of those actors who like you almost feel like he knows something that you don't. And in this movie, that works perfectly. So he plays Father Romero, and he's a senior figure at the convent. Um, every word that comes out of his mouth feels careful and measured, like he's hiding a much bigger truth. And the convent itself almost feels like a character. The cold stone corridors, a ritualistic chanting that goes on in there, the eerie nuns that never break your eye contact. It's soaked in like religious unease. And I mentioned earlier about the cinematography, the way this movie's shot, the wide landscapes, the long silences, the brutal quick cuts when things unravel. The director's really got a confidence here, um, and he wants you to be uncomfortable. He's okay with you being uncomfortable, and this movie will make you feel uncomfortable at times. So we're going to go a bit deeper into the story now, and there might be a few spoilers here. So if you want to watch the movie without spoilers, obviously go ahead and watch that, and then come back here. I would love to hear your views and your opinions on the movie in the comments below. So yeah, I'll see you soon if you're going now. But if you're staying, then cool. Let's get into it. One of the most striking elements is the way that Grace's memories like bleed into her present time. So you've got a childhood trauma, the death of her father, her mother's obsession with purity. It all paints this picture like of a woman who's been running from faith her whole life, and now faith's coming back to get her. There's a twist at the end involving reincarnation, or at least the possibility of it. The film never fully confirms anything, and I actually like that. I like the ambiguity. Um, it leaves it up to the viewer to interpret things the way they want to interpret them. Um, is Grace a saint? Is she possessed? Is a cursed soul stuck in a loop of some sort? The ending leans into mysticism, but it leaves enough open for interpretation. So two people could go and watch this movie and have total different opinions about what the ending actually means. But I love that. And then you've got the final confrontation at the cliff's edge. Is it a nod to martyrdom, rebirth, a literal fall from grace? But again, there's no clear answer. And that's where consecration, I think, really excels. It doesn't hold your hand through and explain everything to you on the way. It does leave a lot up to your imagination and what your beliefs are, maybe. Um, and I thought that was really good. I like that they trust us to just, make our own opinions up of the story and not be at the whim of whatever the director is saying to us. So let's dig into what's going on beneath the surface. Concentration's obsessed with the tension between institutional faith and personal belief. Grace represents someone who's been scarred by religion and is now forced to confront it in its most rigid and literal form. The nuns, particularly the prioress, represent an old guard, absolute, unquestioning obedience, and we see the horror that can come from that. There's also a heavy thread of feminine repression running through the film. The idea of women being either saints or sinners, and there's no in between. Grace fights that binary the whole way through the movie. And finally, trauma. There's so much in this film. It feels like a metaphor for how deeply ingrained trauma and buried, it can manifest itself as something spiritual or even violent. The horror is less about jump scares, as I mentioned. It's more about an existential fear of not knowing what's real, what is real and what's not real. So my final thoughts on the movie is that I don't think that this movie is going to be for everyone. It is slow at times and it's quiet and it's more interested in exploring ideas than just having balls to the wall scares. But for me, that really works. Um, Jena Malone gives a fantastic lead performance. She's commanding. Danny Houston is effortless acting in this. Cinematography is stunning, and the themes are deep enough to keep you thinking about the movie long after the credits have rolled. So I love that. I love being able to go away, keep thinking about a movie, and think, "Oh, did this mean this, or did this mean that?" And it's like, yeah, it can keep you thinking for quite a while. This movie. It's not perfect. The pacing's a little uneven at time. The ambiguity might frustrate some viewers. That ambiguity that I mentioned, some people like to have it explained to them and say like, this is the clear-cut definition of what's just happened. But I love the ambiguity. I love that it's up to your interpretation of what's happened in this movie. If you want a horror that's got a side of theology and trauma, Consecration's definitely worth your time. So 16th of June it comes out, a digital release. If it sounds like your cup of tea, it certainly was mine. Like I say, I love religious horrors. Give it a chance. So thanks for turning up to this podcast, the community podcast for Nerdy Up North. If you've seen Consecration or if you're planning on seeing it, I'd love to hear what your takes are. Drop a message in the comments. Come and look at the Nerdy Up North socials. Tag us in that. Come to the Discord. It's like a little family in there. Or just scream into the void. Whatever whatever takes your fancy. If you've enjoyed the episode, be sure to follow the podcast, leave a review, or tell your local priest. Until next time, stay curious, stay spooky, and don't trust any silent nuns.